It was the summer of 1984 that Alexey Pajitnov, a young software engineer of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, created something truly remarkable. This is the classic arcade retro game, Tetris. And this is Brainspill. My name is Tank, and today we're talking about the history of the infamous game Tetris, what happened to Alexey, and how his beloved game was ripped from his grasp. This story is actually surprisingly a lot more interesting than you might think. Before we jump in, if you like the video, be sure to subscribe to never miss an upload. In the early 1980s, against the backdrop of the Cold War, a soft-spoken computer scientist named Alexey Pajitnov was fascinated by puzzles and was inspired by a desire to explore the potential of computer programming. He conceived the idea that would evolve into one of the most iconic and enduring video games in all of gaming history: Tetris. The big game that inspired this was the classic game of tetrominos, shapes into a rectangle without any spaces. This being the framework on the concept for Tetris sounds pretty simple, but Tetris also sounds pretty simple. But what's behind this story is a lot more complicated, and we're about to find out what is involved to bring this classic of the game to the digital world. Alexey's initial vision was simple yet profound. He sought to create a game that reflected the challenges of spatial organization. The concept materialized as falling geometric shapes that players had to skillfully arrange to form complete lines, with increasing gravitational speed as the game went on. A simple and novel idea, but sometimes the simplest things are quite simply the best. As he meticulously programmed the game, Alexey could not have foreseen the monumental impact that Tetris would have on the gaming industry and popular culture as a whole. Tetris, named after the Greek numerical prefix tetra, denoting 4, signifying that 4 square blocks central to the game's gameplay, began as a personal project on an Electronica 60, this being a Soviet computer. The game was very basic, with bare-bones graphics and no sound at the time. Whilst this is rather mediocre compared to what we know as Tetris today, this is the first building block to this cultural phenomenon. And that's just it. Why would you make a video game with all the flashing colours and lights when it doesn't work? The key thing is to make a game with a simple, easily graspable and enjoyable concept. Make sure it works, and you can add all the bells and whistles you want later down the line. Alexey's dedication to his craft and passion for his puzzles drove the development process of Tetris. His work was a solitary endeavour, an exploration of the intersection between logic and pure entertainment. And you know what? I can appreciate that, because you don't find many games these days that can tread that very fine line, something that meets all criteria. Most games these days can't walk that very fine line. Basically, they're half-baked and not really done, or they'll be rammed with rather ridiculous things like microtransactions or a battle royale mode. Tetris ain't seen nothing like it. Okay, I'll give you that, but I don't think that was Alexey's original vision. I don't think he even knew what a battle royale even was, but there we are. He was ahead of his time. The game's simplicity and addictive nature quickly caught the attention of those who were fortunate enough to experience the game in its infancy. Even in 1985, a colour version of Tetris was soon developed, making this even more appealing and widespread to the Russian masses. However, the story of Tetris took an unexpected turn when a businessman named Robert Maxwell entered the scene. Maxwell, who was known for his ambitious ventures, saw the potential for Tetris to become a global sensation and sought to capitalise on its rising popularity. As Alexey worked for the Soviet government, they actually owned the intellectual rights to Tetris, resulting in it being years until Alexey would actually receive any of the money for his rather amazing creation. In a rather ironic twist, Maxwell decided to try and acquire the rights to Tetris through rather questionable means, resulting in a dispute over ownership. Given that many companies would try to emulate the success of Tetris, legal disputes soon arose over the trademark rights of Tetris and the game itself, with the Soviet government and many Western companies, including that of Atari, Nintendo, and the businessman Robert Maxwell, all trying to get a piece of the Tetris pie. Maxwell, being the cheeky little shit he was, even went as far to pull some of his connections to try and give himself an edge, including contacting the then leader of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, to cancel the contract Nintendo had previously tried to acquire for the rights to use Tetris. Dirty tactics to try and get one over on the competition. The ensuing legal battles and diplomatic complexities mirrored the geopolitical tensions of the era. Despite Maxwell's best efforts, the true genius behind Tetris, Alexey, maintained his steadfast commitment to the integrity of his creation. Tetris eventually transcended national boundaries, finding its way into the West through a series of negotiations and licensing agreements. As Tetris gained traction on a global scale, it became a symbol of the universality of video games, a medium capable of transcending linguistic and cultural barriers. I mean, it's one of those things where if you have a game where it has no plot, no story, and no one voicing anyone in the actual game, then you can make something pretty simple, as long as it's fun, and market it to the entire world. This includes in the mid-80s, where Tetris hit the United States, and as you might expect, it was a huge hit for the American audiences as well, despite the fact that this was a product of the USSR by extension. After years of back and forth between numerous companies, it was this guy, Hank Rogers and Nintendo, that emerged as the winners of the Tetris rights in 1989, where they released their own versions of the game with their now infamous NES console. The game's distinctive soundtrack further contributed to its atmospheric allure, making this one of the most memorable and iconic games of all time. Look, I know we've listened to Tetris music and little bits here and there throughout the video, but I'm just gonna let you listen to this. Just take it all in. So, what happened to Alexey? Well, he would soon start making money from his creation when in 1996, the rights reverted from Russia to him, enabling him to actually reap the rewards a number of years later from this game-changing creation. Alexey soon moved to the United States and was working for Microsoft, working with Hank Rogers on trying to license the game for more Western audiences. Alexey's vision, rooted in his desire to explore the possibilities of computer programming, led to the creation of a cultural phenomenon that continues to captivate audiences decades later. So much so that you can even play a Battle Royale version of the game. Yeah, I'm not joking, here it is, it looks pretty mental. But that's it, everything's going to take a natural course, move to the next level, jump on trends, and constantly innovating on such a unique and classic idea. Tetris. What a brilliant game. If you guys like that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.